Venezuela is accusing the United States of piracy. That's a quote, piracy, after U.S. forces seized an oil tanker off the Venezuelan coast. Attorney General Pam Bondi released this video. It says the tanker was used to transport sanctioned oil to Iran. President Trump suggested yesterday the United States would keep the oil. CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie Daggett joins me now. Charlie, we've learned a lot more today. What have we learned?
Yeah, well, first of all, this is a multi-agency operation. So it had to do with the Department of Treasury, which kicked it off, the FBI, part of the investigation, Department of Homeland Security. But the video that you saw, that's where you got highly trained special operations forces that are embedded with the Coast Guard. Now, they were helped out and backed up by sailors and Marines that came off the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft. So those helicopters that you're seeing there in that video would have come from them. And that's where the backup came. Now, that tanker is now under U.S. control, under U.S. forces. We've actually been tracking it. It has turned north toward the United States. And the decision will be made. The Trump administration, anyway, has said, look, this is, I assume the oil is going to be ours. It won't be quite that straightforward. There are certain legal processes to look into, but that's where it stands now. And we have been tracking where that had been. In fact, our colleagues for CBS News out in the Hong Kong Bureau around Malaysia were tracking not only this ship, that's the skipper, but several ships on the way from Venezuela and places like Iran to transfer fuel and oil to China. And it's just happening there in the open seas. They switch off their electronic transmitters. They even put like sheets and blankets over the name of their ship. They change their names from time to time. And the Trump administration says there are plenty more of these sanctioned ships out there, maybe as many as 80, maybe as many as 30 inside the areas around Venezuela itself. And, you know, the gloves are off. They've threatened to take those too.
So this is, as you just described, Charlie, a pretty elaborate sanctions evading process. And the administration is saying we're no longer going to leave it to diplomatic means to try to resolve that or turn the other way. We're going to board these vessels. Yeah.
And you know, Major, I think we have to keep in mind, this is Operation Southern Spear. This is a drug interdiction operation. And the amount of the capacity and the amount of military hardware gives Defense Secretary Hegseth and President Trump, to a larger degree, all kinds of options. But in terms of giving a game plan, there are lawmakers who are saying, well, wait a minute, is this drug interdiction? Is this oil interdiction? Are we at war with Venezuela? We've just learned there's another squadron of F-35 fighter jets that are now headed to Puerto Rico. We saw F-18 fighter jets in Puerto Rico. We saw in the past couple of days more Marines landing in Puerto Rico. So they're gearing up for a fight. But what that fight entails and what it means and what they can do is still unknown. But I can tell you this with confidence: if there were to be a land invasion, you don't have anywhere near enough troops for anything like that. You've got Tomahawk cruise missiles that can hit Venezuela, inside Venezuela. You've got the F-18s. You're going to have to take out Venezuela's defense systems. Those are Russian defense systems, which are fully capable. So all of the pieces are in place, but perhaps the plan isn't in place or hasn't been shared as to what exactly the president and the defense secretary plan to do.
Charlie Daggett, thank you so very much. CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and moderator of Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan, joins me now. Speaking of that word, sanctions, more sanctions today, Margaret.
Yes, actually, Major, this kind of financial chokehold is something the Trump administration likes to use, but this is a little bit different because it goes alongside this seizure of the tanker. There were 6 shipping companies. They span from the South Pacific through the Caribbean through Europe. And energy analysts have told us that the decision to board this ship, and the sanctioning here suggests maybe they'll do this on other vessels. The Trump administration can do this at this moment in time because oil prices are low. So taking more oil and supply off the market isn't necessarily going to inflate the price dramatically. So he can afford to do it. And then when he's looking at Venezuela, Venezuelan exports have been up despite the sanctions. So they've been able to use these methods to continue to bring revenue into the Maduro regime.
To evade the sanctions.
To evade the sanctions and keep the Maduro regime in place. And so to the point Charlie was making in there, if this is about drug interdiction, that's not what's on those ships. Right. And if this is about taking out the Maduro regime, then the legal premise for that has not been laid out, certainly to Congress. But these sanctions are targeted at the Maduro family as well. Among the people on that list Treasury released were the narco nephews. There are 3 individuals, nephews of Maduro's wife. 2 of them had served time in U.S. prisons. They had actually been convicted on drug trafficking charges years ago. The Biden administration released them as part of a prisoner swap to free some unjustly detained Americans very recently. So now they're back on a U.S. list. Are they of value? Former officials told me probably not, since they were in U.S. custody before the information was gathered from them. But it's another finger that points at the Maduro regime and says, we are putting pressure on all of you as well. So brings us back to what's the end goal here?
When I talk to lawmakers, and I'm sure you have the same conversations, Margaret, they say yes, it's about drugs, yes, it's about sanctions, but more than anything else, this is an elaborate pressure campaign on Maduro to get him to leave.
It is a pressure campaign to get him to leave, but that is not what the president is explaining to the country or to Congress. It is not the legal premise that has been briefed to Congress, which is very specific to these fast-moving drug boats. So if there is a policy, it hasn't been articulated and explained in the way that it seems to be taking shape. We're putting these pieces together. Right. And it's interesting because if this is about bringing the Maduro regime to its knees, going after their revenue source is potentially an effective way to do that. Is the goal to flip generals so that they turn against Maduro and have some kind of coup? There have been unsuccessful ones in the past. Cutting off their revenue, another successful way to do this. The administration would argue they're also trying to cut off the drug supply, which is a revenue source. But what is that end game? And then the alternative leader, who is someone who is viewed as legitimate by the world community, Maria Corina Machado, is now in Oslo, Norway, having received the Nobel Peace Prize. If she is to go back and lead the country, she has to somehow figure out a way to get back into it. But is that part of the plan?
And
that has not been explained.
To your point, she endorsed the seizure.
She has.
She said, look, this is part of a pressure campaign, and I'm okay with it.
She is saying that, somewhat ironically for a Nobel Peace Prize winner to say, I embrace the use of force in limited measures. But back to the U.S. interests here, we went and looked at Mark Esper, the former defense secretary's book. A team member on Face the Nation, Alana Lease, did this, pulled the excerpts from when this was discussed during the first administration, seizing these ships. And the defense secretary at the time said, we can do that. We have the ability to do that in a military operation or through the Coast Guard. But here are the questions I have. And among them was, what happens if the crew on board resists us boarding? What are those rules of engagement? And the reason you ask those questions in that setting is to lay out the what ifs, because as soon as you put service people in harm's way, and by definition, using them in this way puts them potentially at risk, it brings us closer to conflict. And so considering that this is an escalation, and it's an interesting change in strategy, and we know that administration officials were on the Hill briefing Congress behind closed doors recently. What's the end game? What's the plan? We're going to continue to talk about it.
To your point, when they belayed down from those helicopters, they had guns drawn.
Yes.
For a reason. Margaret Brennan, outstanding stuff as always. Thank you so much.